All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is John Hines. You may know me online as my handle, The Geek Boy. We are with a group called Fanboys 918 that plants our flag a little north of here. But right now, we're going to bring to the stage one of Retro Expo's special guests. You know him from SpongeBob. You know him as one of the inaugural contestants on Dancing with the Stars. You may even know him from a little role he did on Seinfeld, but we're going to try to get to know him as him. Folks, give it up for Mr. John Hurley.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we have a lot of things we're going to talk about today, but I'm going to be selfish because I'm the one on stage. And we're going to say, I want to know how in the world you become a game show host, because that's pretty much all they said I was good for in high school.
Well, it's very funny because I remember one time in my agent's office, he asked me, he turned to me, he goes, he said, I just got a call from NBC, from the casting office, and they said, would John be interested in doing a game show? And I turned to my agent and I said, how would I've never even thought of it before. And then I started thinking about it. And then I realized, and it scared me to death, the idea of being out there for a half hour or an hour show and having no script, flying blind. Right. And the truth is you really are out there without a script. You know the game and you can push the game along, but as a game show host, you are leaping and hoping the net will appear. But what it does teach you, and this is one of the great experiences that I've had in game shows, is that you trust yourself that inside you are enough, that how you perceive things, how you react to things, how you process information, that there's enough inside to take care of that. And I always say one prayer before I walk on stage, whether it's Broadway, whether it's television, doesn't really matter. I say one prayer. I say, God, let me be surprised. And that's all I say. And what it does is it relaxes me, so I have no reason to be nervous, because now I'm not out there trying to do something. I'm out there reacting to something. I know what I'm going to say. I just don't know why I'm going to say it in the case of in the case of a play. In the case of something extemporaneous like a game show, I'm only reacting to what they give me. So that's all I have to do is just sit there, and I'm always looking for a surprise, something new that never happened before. And in the 2,000 performances that I've done of Billy Flynn on Broadway in the musical Chicago, the 1,000 performances that I did as King Arthur in Spamalot on Broadway, all of the 180 times 5 years that I did Family Feud, 3 years of To Tell the Truth, and then all of the years of just television sitcoms, it's always been true. I always found a surprise, something to say, I wasn't expecting that. And that is the greatest thing, that you can walk out and realize on a stage that entertaining is the art of the infinite possibility. Anything can happen. And that's what I look for when I go out.
Wow, that's great. And now, how many of those shows on the game show side, how many would you tape a day?
Well, it's a severe.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You want to hear a schedule? I don't think anybody in the history of entertainment had to entertain a schedule like I did when I was in Las Vegas doing Spamalot as King Arthur. For those of you who don't know what that is, that was the award-winning Monty Python musical, and I did it on Broadway, and I did it for several years out at the Wynn Hotel there in Las Vegas. But I was also doing Family Feud at the same time. This is what the weekend schedule would be like. I would go down to the stage at the Wynn, and from 7 until 10 o'clock, I would do Spamalot. I would then go hop in the limo, go out to the private airport, hop on a plane, fly out to L.A., catch some sleep, get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then do 6 episodes of Family Feud. Whereupon I would then hop in the limo, go out to the private airport, fly out to Las Vegas, and Saturday night do 2 shows.
Gosh.
I'm there now until midnight. Whereupon I went in the limo. I went back to L.A., caught a few hours of sleep, and did another 6 shows of Family Feud. Whereupon I then went to the airport, hopped in a limo, and did the final performance of Spamalot.
Wow.
And on Monday, he rested. It was the most insane schedule I have ever kept as an entertainer, and I tell you, it was. But you know, on the other hand, it was so worthwhile because you had to say, I can't believe I've come this far to be this busy.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
I mean, it was just a thrill to be able to say, I'm actually doing this. It's insane, but it all worked out.
Did you ever have any crazy moments with the contestants or anything? And guys, I know he's on Seinfeld. We're going to get to that. But
listen, as I say, it's the act of the infinite possibilities. So when I would go up to the face-off there on Family Feud, and I would have 2 intelligent men on either side of me, and the question would be, name a classic film that begins with the letter C. And you would say?
Casablanca.
Casablanca. Give me another one. What's that? Carousel. In other words, Caddyshack, Citizen Kane, as you say, was out there. They were all up there on the board. Seabiscuit.
Survey said.
You can't make that up.
Wow.
And then there was always the structure of the game, for some reason, always ended up this way. We'd start with the captain of the team, asking him the first, and it was usually the father or figure or whatever. And then we go down to the second person, so all the way down to the fifth person. Fifth person, for some reason, and I don't know why they chose to stack the deck this way, because everybody was going to get a shot to answer no matter what. But Grandma was always the last one. So when you got down to Grandma, you never knew what you were going to get, because Grandma was either corpus mentis or non-corpus mentis. And so you'd go down there. Well, the question was, name something that you would do to yourself to make yourself seem more attractive on a first date. And you go down the line, and it just, the common, take a bath, change your clothes, all the way down the line. It's just, it's just easy answer. I mean, these are softballs. I get down to Grandma on the other end. I grab her hand, put her hand up, give her a little quick kiss on the hand, and I say, all right, I want you to think back. First date, what would you have done to make yourself seem more attractive? And she says, stuff your pants with a vegetable.
Okay.
All right. I said, good answer. No, it's not a good answer. It's a very wrong answer. But as I said, yeah, it did. And it all it does is compound and underscore. Oh, thank you, dear. A little bit of coffee. Thank you, honey.
I remember the time.
That's right.
I did.
It just underscored the fact that people become deer in the headlights when all of a sudden you put a camera on them. And the truth is that we really don't understand the camera. And so it becomes this thing. And I remember the first time, the first soap opera I did. Here I'm acting in a scene. Well, I'm very comfortable on stage acting, but all of a sudden you bring this little black hole, and all of a sudden it becomes about the black hole. All of you become, okay. I walk over here, but do I walk normally or walk fast? Will the black hole find me? And it became about that. And so learning to be an actor and learning to be an actor on television are 2 completely different things. You have to learn to forget about the camera. Let it do its job. It will catch you as it needs to, and in a way that has been pre-established by a camera director. So let them impose their reality and then just do your work, and everything will be fine. But it goes back to the idea that the camera scares everybody. It really does.
Yes, it does. So you brought up that you were on soap operas. I've talked to some people that have done that kind of work. And it's brutal apparently as well. How did that compare to the other schedule?
Well, a soap opera really is a very complex entertainment form, because you are only taking a slice of life and moving it along at the speed of a snail.
Right.
If you are pregnant with a child, you could have that child over a year and a half, or you could have it in 3 weeks. It's on whatever the writers
Right.
decide. Well, in truth, I was Mr. Daytime Television for all through the 80s. 83 was when I started on a show called The Edge of Night. And I killed that show on ABC. But I did get to say, and soaps are notorious for this, the stupidest thing I have ever said on all of my years of television. I was playing the young kind of cuckold PR assistant to the kind of Joan Collins figure. And she had me wound around her, and we were having a little torrid affair, as you can well imagine, and I hated it because she was holding my job, everything, over, and it was very emasculating. And finally I said I just couldn't take it any longer, and in the scene, I stand up from her desk, and I walk towards the door, and I say to her, "How dare you try to cut off my ears and pin them to your door like some victorious bullfighter?"
Okay.
So I got through dress rehearsal without cracking, and then finally I said, "Do I have to say this line?" And then all of a sudden you hear over the monitor from the control booth, "As written, please." The stupidest thing I have ever said on television.
Somebody in the
But as
writers'
I
room is
told you,
really happy about that.
I was Mr. Daytime, so I did just about everything you could do on television. I was the original twin brothers on Daytime. You have me to thank for all of that nonsense. I was married to Susan Lucci 4 times, obligatorily. I came back from the dead more times than were truly necessary. And all of that, I finally worked up to the #1 show on Daytime, which was The Young and the Restless, where I became young, heroic cardiac surgeon Dr. James Granger, with large, heroic cardiac surgeon hair. And they wrote this role as some sort of a medical majesty. I could do no wrong. No matter what happened, if you were ill, fortunately, you were in the embrace of Dr. Granger, who would take care of you no matter what would happen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, truth be known, the 3 years that I was on Young and the Restless, I never kept one patient alive. Not one. And I don't think that the writers ever tallied this up, or they would have realized that what they had written was Daytime's version of Dr. Jack Kevorkian, because they'd be lying on the deathbed, they'd be lying on their bed in the ICU there, and pretty soon you go, wait, no, I'm not dying, I'm going to zip them up in a body bag, and they went right out the door. And it got to the point where every actor was scared to death to work with me. They would call their agent if they found them anyway getting close to my storyline. They were saying, have you heard from the producers, because I'm getting close to, I'm talking to Hurley. Truth be known. Yes, Daytime. Now, I'll tell you one other story that is very, very funny. When I played the first Twin Brothers, ABC was just learning how they were going to present this on television and how they were going to do it. And of course, you have to have a body double, somebody who looks like you from behind, so that they can shoot over your shoulder at you when you're playing one twin. You can talk back, and you can have fist fights and all the things that you would expect you would do on daytime television. But the person has to look like you. They finally found somebody, and his day-to-day job was as a bouncer down at a nightclub called the Limelight in New York City, and this was back in the mid '80s. Very popular. It was an old church in Midtown, and his job was there, guarding the velvet rope at night. And he was a big guy, and my hair at the time was black, not the color that it is now. And by the way, some of this is real. But so this person would come in during the day, and he would be my body double. Now, perfect. He looked perfect from behind, no questions asked. However, if he opened his mouth, everything was like this, and it was like these, those, and those, and it was like, oh man, he was straight out of the Bronx. I said, oh my goodness. I said, and then he was saying my lines so that I would answer him in the other character, and that's what they'd be recording. Then we would switch, and he would say the lines from the other character, and so on and so forth. Well, it got to the point where he was just the worst actor in the world, and I said to the producers, tell him to shut up. I said, I can't tell him this, but I said, he's just throwing me off because all I'm doing is listening to him trying to say my line. And we're just in two different worlds, culturally. And so I said, just tell him to be quiet. So he didn't speak, and that was fine. And then when we were finished, he would say, well, I guess they don't need me anymore. I'm going to go back to my dressing room and work on my play. I said, your play? He said, yeah, I'm writing a play about my life. So, well, good for you. My body double was Chaz Palminteri. He was writing Bronx Tale.
Wow, that is
story.
fantastic.
We still see each other all the time, and it's, just look at each other and go, but for the grace of God, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the last hosting thing that I want to talk about is probably the one that is most seen in my house, and that's the dog show.
Oh, yes, National Dog Show on Thanksgiving Day. How many
Yes,
people watch it?
Oh, yes. It's a staple. How did that
Well, it came about very simply. The director of the head of NBC Sports went home one night with a copy of the movie Best in Show, which is a wonderfully funny. If you've never seen it, it is hysterically funny, and it basically is a parody of the Westminster Dog Show and all of the crazy things that go on with the exhibitors and the people and the dogs themselves, right. Things that could happen, that do happen, and he liked it so much, he said, he came in Monday morning to NBC Sports at the morning meeting and said, I know what we're going to do with that 2-hour slice after the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Right before football, we have a 2-hour segment, and we're going to do a dog show. Well, they about laughed him out of the office. But by the end of the day, he had licensed the Philadelphia show as the National Dog Show. He had Purina on board as a sponsor, and Tuesday morning he called me in Los Angeles, and I answered the phone, and I said, hello, and he said, woof, woof. And that's how it all started. That was 2002. Now, that's 21 years ago. And we are now the most watched show in NBC all year long. We get over 30 million people watching that show during that 2-hour slice. I mean, those are numbers NBC hasn't seen since the Seinfeld days.
Right.
And it came all from the fact that this one guy had this one idea, and it was probably the greatest piece of programming, I think, ever done on television. And it gives me a chance to say some of the stupidest things I've ever said on television. The first year they brought the Old English Sheepdog up to the judge. Now, I'm a neophyte. I have never been to a dog show before, never mind host one. Well, I have, fortunately, the most knowledgeable man in the history of dogs, David Fry, as my co-host. So they brought the Old English Sheepdog up to the judge, and if you don't know what an Old English Sheepdog is, it is 80 pounds of hair and 2 pounds of actual dog. And So the judge was this elegantly gowned woman, and she walks around to the back of the dog, and she starts putting her hands all over the back of the dog. And I turned to David Fry, my co-host. I said, David, can you explain to us what she's doing? He says, John, she's putting her hands on the dog to make sure that the shoulders and the hips align with the written specification of what the perfect Old English sheepdog should be. He said, because you can hide a really bad dog with a really good haircut. I said, you're telling me I went to junior prom. It gets worse. She walks around to the front of the dog. She starts picking through all of the hair on the dog's head. I said, David, what is she doing now? He says, John, she's trying to find the eyes, to gauge the attentiveness of the dog. I said, really? I said, well, if she picks through all of that hair and she finds only one eye, she's got the wrong end of the dog. Things I have no business doing.
That's fantastic. Now, so how long does it take to prep for that show?
Well,
what goes into that?
in fairness, it takes a good solid week of. We have new breeds that are coming in, and of course, I'm doing it once a year, so you have to kind of reestablish yourself. It's 200. We have 200 plus breeds of dogs, and 2,000 dogs entered, and so. You have to know quite a bit about, because we have to keep it going and keep it funny and light, and I've got to look at dogs and try to come up with something funny to say about them, like when they take the little Pekingese, which is a little ball of fur. It's all it is a ball of fur. It's the slowest animal, and they always put it at the end of the parade because it can't keep up with all of the other dogs. And as it's wandering into the room, I said, you could be walking this dog backwards for 2 years and not realizing it. But yes, it's a wonderful show, and it's a great example of great television. And I'm in the beginning I was a little nervous about it because I said, what happens to my acting career if I'm doing all of these other things? And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I firmly believe that your career is something that's over your shoulder, and you can take a half look at everything back there and say, oh, well, son of a gun, there's my career. And you can't figure it out beforehand. You can't. I can't look out there and say, well, this is my career. It doesn't work that way. It's you go by opportunity, and what comes your way is, if you can see it as, if you can see the success in your imagination of what has been offered to you, then you are obliged to do it, because I always believe in the power of imagination. I believe that that's the only way God can talk to me, is through my imagination, not through my rational mind. That's a whole other thing. That'll lie to me, and it has the fight or flight syndrome, and it's just trying to keep me safe. But my imagination tells me everything I need to do, whether it's a dog show or whether it's anything. It doesn't really matter, game show or whatever.
I was gonna say I was doing my research for this, and like your career is a snapshot of like late '90s and early aughts pop culture. You're on things like Silk Stockings and Baywatch and X-Files. Was there any of those shows that you have really like, oh wow, that was a great moment, or any of those shows like, I don't ever want to work on this again or do anything like that again?
Well, I did a film once where I had a no nudity clause. And the only reason I did the film was I really wanted to play a detective. And this would have been back in, it was called Mirror Images, if you have to be over 17 to watch it. But so in fact, you should probably over 50 to watch it. Everybody in the film was naked, except me. I was the only one that had a no nudity clause. But that didn't mean I didn't have love scenes. So I'm the only one in a love scene with his pants on. I look like an absolute idiot. And all I gleaned from that entire experience was, if it says nudity, you're going to have to be nude, whether you like it or not. So don't do the film. So I came out of there looking like an absolute idiot, but I learned a great deal.
So I guess we need to talk about one of the elephants in the room. Let's talk about your experience on Seinfeld.
That
little
show.
That little show that you did. You might remember it. I think it was a thing for a little bit.
I'll tell you how it all happened. I had my own sitcom on ABC called A Whole New Ball Game. Very, very funny show, but it's a crapshoot, really is. When it's because so many things are happening at one time, and you never have control over any of them. And one of which is they keep moving the show around, so an audience could never find you. The wizards there at ABC always felt they had a better idea for the show, and it didn't work well one week in this slot. Well, let's move it over here, and it's meanwhile they'll never find your show, and it's the beginning of the end. I should have known that. So Wednesday morning, about to go to work, and I get a call saying, "Don't bother coming to work. They pulled the plug on the show." Well, we lasted 3/4 of a season. So to that point, that had been the longest I had been able to keep a show alive. Mm-hmm. And so that night I went out for dinner with my manager, crying in my beer, trying to take the cancellation as personally as I possibly could. And Larry David's office had called and said, we have this, we heard John's show got canceled. We have this guest star role on Seinfeld this week, and we think John could hit it out of the park and have a lot of fun with it. And he said, we have the table read tomorrow. Table read is where everybody gets around with the network and the actors, and we listen to the show for the first time, read around a table. And so I said to my manager, I said, "Tell him no." I said, "I'm still, licking my wounds off the cancellation today." I said, "I want to go guest star on somebody else's show." Remember, opportunity and ego. So, in his wisdom, my manager never called Larry's office back, and they were expecting me at 10:30. So he called me and said, "They're waiting for you over there." I said, "Go blow it out of your system." So I said, "Okay." So I went over there, and they handed me a half-written script. Seinfeld was the most disorganized show on television, the most disorganized. And they handed me a copy of the actual J. Peterman catalog, because they were bringing on this character who has, and they said, "We just want him to sound the way the catalog is written." So I was looking through this catalog, and the gentleman back here has a copy of it. Hold it up for a second. See, there it is. It's even odd looking in its shape. But every one of them, and there are all pastel drawings of the actual clothing, not photographs. And this long kind of Hemingway style adventure copy that attached to the one-of-a-kind piece of romantic wear that they are selling. And it sounds like a Hemingway drama. It's like I was, climbing K2 in my Oxford button-down. And so as I read this, I said, "It's the craziest thing I've ever seen," but I said, "This could be a lot of fun." So they said, "Just make him sound the way, like this is just coming out of off his lips normally. This is his normal dialogue." So I thought to myself that he sounded a little bit like a bad Charles Kuralt and a combination of a 40s radio drama. And so that was the origin of J. Peterman. And the first, I met Elaine in the rain, and it was history after that. Shortly at the end of the episode, she was working for the J. Peterman catalog, and I now had a new role, and in a much bigger role in my life. And I had no idea, no concept of how large that was going to be. Right. Because anything you did on Seinfeld, all of America watched. 37 million people every week were watching the show. And that's before we even got to the whole concept of reruns or anything, or syndication. It was an amazing, Thursday night, America stopped and they watched Seinfeld. Some also watched Friends as well. They did very well too, but it was must-see TV, they call it. But Peterman became, for me, a kind of an icon that I couldn't let go of and wouldn't let go of, because he was such a magical piece of creativity. And what I loved about him is that he was one part poet and one part lunatic. And it lives to this day. Many of you have heard of this new platform called Cameo.com. Cameo.com, if you haven't heard of it, is a place where you go and celebrities will, kind of in a similar fashion, but they will do recorded announcements for birthdays and retirements, wedding roasts. I've done one on erectile dysfunction, believe it or not. Just the craziest things you have ever heard that you are doing stuff for. But so I still do it. But the reason that people come to me to do them is that they want to hook into the J. Peterman monologues. And because of that, and you were nice enough to sit here, I will give you one of those monologues. And these are ones that I write now because I control the character a great deal better than Seinfeld and the writers there ever did. So I was traveling off to that colorful country of Papua New Guinea, there to meet the little naked natives of Bantubesh, diminutive in their size but not in the scope of their wisdom. But I was there on my annual mission of charitable giving. Yes, I was presenting them with a Toto washless toilet. Elegant and eco-friendly, even under the canopy of a tropical rainforest. And in return, they tried to show their appreciation to me by showing me how to manage one of the most difficult forms of jungle weaponry, the blowgun. Yes, they tried to show me how to negotiate a small poison dart through a long bamboo tube. Unfortunately, as I put the tube to my lips, I developed an instinctive impulse to inhale. And I shish kebabbed my uvula. As the poison released itself through my body, I dropped to the ground, curled myself into a little fetal ball, screaming, "Mommy, make it stop!" Fortunately, the shaman of the tribe was wise enough to concoct an antitoxin tea brewed from the ganja watuki nut. 2 sips and 20 minutes later, and I was back to my old self, the recipient of the best of jungle pharmacopoeia. Now, I'm told that that toilet that I left behind for the little Bantubesh has become something of a spiritual center. Every morning they rise at sunrise. They form a long single line and wait for their opportunity to worship the throne. And so I think my work was done.
That is amazing. Okay, I can't think of a better way to start our Q&A after that. Has anybody got anybody? Yes, please go. And if you want, we've got mics on either side of the room.
Oh, we can hear you.
If you want, cool. Whatever you
Shout
want.
her out.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what your favorite Seinfeld episode was.
Well, I've been asked that many times, and I do answer the same way. There was a really wonderful episode that we did, which was the Friars Club episode where... I'm sorry. No. Let me take that back. It was the wedding cake episode. Yes, the wedding cake episode, and I'll tell you why. I just thought it was the best written and the best executed by the director, by the cast, by the writers. Everything was, I think, at its best. And that was the episode where Elaine sneaks into my office because she's now developed a sugar rush from all of the get well soon parties that are going on, and she wolfs down a priceless piece of wedding cake from the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, $20,000 plus 20 plus, and she replaces it with a $2 slice of Entenmann's. In that episode, they also had the Frogger score that George had at a local pizzeria, and it was still. His score was still the top score, and all these years had passed, and he went back and said, "I'm still the number one." He says, and they're closing the pizzeria down, so they've got to move. He's got to keep the score. So he's got to find a way to move it across the street to another pizzeria or something that was across the street, and so that's where the mayhem was involved. But it was a beautiful, beautiful episode, and I always think it was just one of the great, and it always ended with that wonderful... When I laid Elaine to waste at the end, and I come in and I have her sit down in front of me, and I said, Elaine, do you have any idea what happens to a butter-based frosting after 6 decades in a poorly ventilated British basement? I have a feeling what you are about to go through will be punishment enough. Oh, the security camera, that's right. Yes, she was dancing around, doing her inimitable dance, yes. Yes?
You probably get this question all the time, but did you always have that magnificent voice? Or
My voice was
elocution lessons?
well, yes and yes. No and yes. my voice was the last one to change in high school. And it was a little squeaky voice like this up until I was about 16. And then one day it just dropped. And then, but from there, and during that time, in the late 60s, I was surrounded by popular music, obviously, the Beatles and everybody else, and always listening to AM radio. And the DJs on AM radio in the late 60s were absolutely memorable. And they all played with their voices, and everything was about the top. We're going to play down the top 100 songs. And everything was, you could have every album ever recorded. They always had these wonderfully magical, musical voices, and I was enthralled by them back then. So as my voice began to change, I started to pick up on their mannerisms. And then I began to study voice musically. And then that got to be more serious, and I studied opera. And so I grew up with enough knowledge of the vocal mechanism to know that it is a musical instrument, and the only difference between speaking and singing is just sustaining tone. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. So I learned that I could do anything I wanted by placing my voice correctly. And if I wanted to sing, I could sing. If I wanted to speak, I could speak, and I could speak any way I wanted to. So that became, I think that was kind of the long answer to your question, but it was just by learning to use the voice the way it was intended. And so many people today that are entertainers have no voices. They don't know how to use their voice. And if you go back in the 40s and the 50s, the 60s, these are these great actors that have these, like Humphrey Bogart, these wonderful, but they learned how to use their voices back when they studied. Now they don't anymore. Everybody, you hang up a shingle and you call yourself an actor, and that's it. They can't, but take the microphone away, you can't hear them. And I can tell you time and time again, I've gone to Broadway shows when I'm on Broadway. And it'll be a stunt casting with like a Julia Roberts will be in there like that, and you can't hear her. You can't hear her. Her voice doesn't carry, and it carries nothing with it. And there is something to the fact that you have to study, and you have to study the instrument that you were given to communicate. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, from the 2 episodes of SpongeBob of when you appeared as King Neptune, the one that I'm most proud of is the Neptune Spatula. So, on your thoughts, what are your really thoughts of that first episode you appeared back in 1999 on the older versions of SpongeBob?
Oh, on the old SpongeBob.
Yeah, when you first appeared as King Neptune on Neptune Spatula.
Oh well, they were real nice, and animation opened up to me as a genre because of Peterman. They'd heard this unusual voice on television, and they had to. They said, well, let's get him into animated too. So I played every king and mayor, any of these characters, but that character, King Neptune, has turned out to have a life of its own as well. He continues to appear. In fact, I was just the new show that they're putting out now, which is about Patrick's character, is now. They've kept J. Peterman, or not J. Peterman, they kept Neptune as part of that. So I just went back and kept Neptune alive about 2 weeks ago and recorded it. So, but I always loved it. I always remember that one, that was the Krabby Patty contest when I finally buckled to SpongeBob and said, "SpongeBob, that was quite a burger."
Anyone else have any? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, right there in the back. Sorry.
Hi, sweetheart. Good question. My favorite dog breed is not one that I would ever have as a dog, but I'm going to answer that by saying the best dog that I see in the show is always the Irish Setter, and I'll tell you why. It has this beautiful auburn color to it, the hair. Long, sweeping hair, and the hair just moves like this, and the dog is so elegant, and the head, the neck are so erect. When they come into the ring and they begin their parade through the ring, and it's this huge, huge ring, they always, it looks like a cocktail party, and the redhead has just walked in, and so everybody's head turns like that. It's just a beautiful dog to look at. Now, is it a dog I would want for my own life? No, too much exercising.
Do you have a fur baby at the O'Hurley?
We have three.
Oh,
We
okay.
have a purebred, a little Havanese, and named Lucy, and then we have Charlotte and Mia. They're two little rescues, and they are so funny. It looks like they've been pumped up full of batteries, and they never stop all day long, and it's just wonderful. Yeah.
Sir, you had something else.
You can plead the fifth on this if you want, but I had the biggest crush on Susan Lucci, as you probably know. When she is tempestuous to work with, as we've always heard, or
No, the most elegant, loving actress I can say I've worked with. And I was married to her 4 times, and I was married to Lonnie Anderson twice. Now, so I've had quite a career.
Like, see that little black
I will
book?
tell you, though, and I will say this without qualification, Susan Lucci is the greatest kisser on television.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. And I tell her this to her face in front of her husband. And,
guys,
and I know he kind of goes, I know.
We got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any last minute questions? All right. What are you doing
Yes, sir.
right now? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, sir.
So when you do voice recordings, especially on SpongeBob, do you work along with the rest of the cast members?
You know, oddly enough, in my case, no. And it's not because I have a hygiene problem or anything like that, or just. I'm off working. I live in an airplane. I'm away 200 days a year, so I can always go to a studio. And the way that things work now with the technology, it doesn't matter where you are. You can record anything. In fact, I can record stuff into my phone and send it to them, as long as the quality is good enough. And it's all digital, but as long as the microphone quality is good enough, in most cases they can use it. Yeah. What's that?
Technology magic.
Oh, it sure is. Yeah, it's changed everything, especially in voiceover recording. Yeah. Yes.
John, I wanted to ask about you being in the postmodern Prometheus episode.
Oh, the black and white episode. Yeah, X-Files. Yeah.
Where you played Dr. Francis Polidori.
Mm-hmm. Frankenstein. Yeah.
With Mulder and Scully, you were supposed to, you were telling him about witness the morphogenesis of the Crossophylla,
Mm-hmm.
the fruit fly.
Yep.
I just wanted to know, what that was like with.
Well, that was one of the great. I was lucky enough. As I say, I've been lucky enough to do things in my career that were singular, and that was one of them, because that was Chris Clark had put together or Chris Carter. I'm sorry, Chris Carter had written, and we were good friends, and he was a fan of Peterman and what have you. But he thought they wanted to do a black and white episode, and they wanted to kind of do a parody of the whole Frankenstein genre. And so that was it. And it was absolutely beautifully written. I mean, it could not have been. But I'll tell you, my tongue got twisted over some of those scientific names that oh my goodness, that was not an easy episode to do, because those monologues that Dr. Polidori would just be tripping off his tongue, that was a lot of hours standing in front of a mirror and shaving. Yeah.
Was
But
X-Files still in Vancouver then, or had they come down?
we did
later?
shoot that in Vancouver.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
I didn't
Yep.
know. I couldn't
Yeah,
remember that.
and it was pouring rain.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing about that episode was I remember we had one scene in the show where I'm there leading the townspeople with torches, and they all have, and I'm going, this is a real power kick where you got 100 townspeople with torches following you. I said, that's pretty neat. It really was, the black and white. We ended up winning the the Emmy that year for that particular episode. Yeah. Thank
It
you.
was fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We're just right at the time. Do we have any last questions at all before we break? Okay, you got-
I am heading over. If anybody of you, if you're interested in, we have the photo ops right now, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm heading
That's
over there for photo ops. If you want to, encase this with history, we can. We'll take a photo together. That being said, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
really
sir.
appreciate you being here. It was a lot of fun.
Very much. Appreciate it.